Welcome back, everybody. This is Mynor Ramos with Advanced Insurance Services, and I'm joined by Mike Domico. Most of you have already seen and heard Mike, and he should be a familiar face to you by now. If you haven't, that's because this gentleman has over 50 years of industry experience in the insurance and financial services. And so, one of the questions that uh, agents that are newer coming into the industry or maybe struggling is, where do I get my next client? Where can I find good training? Or what's next? I'm struggling. I'm not where I wanted to be. Or maybe you have found some level of success, but you know that there's something deeper that you can maybe rely on. And so having a conversation with Mike off topic, and I thought maybe this is good. We gotta. So, Mike, what is how do we define success when it comes to insurance agents?
Minor, I'm going to stop talking to you because here I am talking to you, and all of a sudden you want to put me to work.
That's right.
Uh, just kidding, of course. Minor, thank you. I appreciate the opportunity. And what we were discussing, and I'll be glad to share, is a speech that was made in 1940 by a gentleman by the name of E.N. Gray, Grey, just like it sounds. Mr. Gray was an executive with Prudential Insurance Company, and in 1940, he was asked to speak at the National Association of Life Underwriters. I don't know if they're even still around, but they used to be the premier organization for life insurance agents. And he pondered for weeks on what his topic should be. Well, it was no different for a new agent back in 1940 than it is for a new agent today. The problem with our business isn't selling insurance. I have two little dogs I can teach how to sell insurance. The problem is they have a hard time finding other dogs to talk to. So Mr. Gray sat down and he came up with a speech that is absolutely earth shattering. And I certainly recommend the speech is available on the internet at any library. There's a number of authors that have written about it and tried to analyze it. Don't worry about the analyzing part, but get the speech. As a matter of fact, I will make copies, and anybody that contacts me, I'll be glad to email them a copy. He made a speech, and his title simply was The Common Denominator of Success. Now, E.N. Gray went through a lot of the basic stuff that every one of the agents listening to us today is going through right now. You write your list of prospects, you do your list of 50 people that you want to talk to, or some companies have 100 that you're supposed to try to talk to, or you join organizations, or all these things to meet people. But after he went through this whole litany of things like every agent has to when they start in this business, he melded it down to a very, very, very simple statement. It's so simple that I guarantee that 90% of the people listening to this are going to dismiss this immediately. They're going to say, this is the biggest crock I ever heard of. Okay, fine. Do that. You'll fit the mold. Real simple. Common denominator success. A successful agent will do what a failure won't. That's it. End of story. Okay, let's pull it apart a little bit. What was he talking about? Well, we laugh about managers a lot, and some deserve our laughter, but there are some very good people out there that are trying to work with new agents, and we have to recognize them. And as a new agent, when that manager tells you, I want you to go home tonight, I'd like you to make a list of 50 people in your community that you believe you should talk to about insurance. Well, after you scratch your head a little bit, you may have only been in the business 2 or 3 minutes, who knows? You're going to go home and you're going to find at least 100 reasons why you shouldn't do it. If you give in to those reasons, you're on your way to failure. And some people may say to me, Mike, what are you talking about? Why would me not doing something that inane mean I'm going to be a failure. Well, here it is, real simple. And this is what Mynor and I were talking about. You may sit down, and I've done it, and groaned and moaned. Why am I sitting here writing 50 names? And all of a sudden, I end up and I got a list of 60. Or I may end up with a list of 10. Those 10 or those 60 or just the 50 are things that stimulate my mind. Now I look at my list and I say, oh, well, I got 60 names here. What would I even talk about? Well, now you're stimulating your mind again. Well, I would like to hope that your manager was smart enough that that's what he was trying to get through to you. Maybe he wasn't. Maybe he just did what he was told. But the point of the matter is, what A.E. Gray was saying is that the people who put the work into the industry, and that doesn't always look like what you think it is. That doesn't mean you have to be in front of the person every single moment of every single day. We know that's impossible. But when you're not in front of a person, you ought to be figuring out how to get in front of a person. And what are you going to say when you are in front of a person? These are all things that will make you successful. When I'm working with a new agent, I tell them the same thing. Every single one of the new agents I've ever worked with, you have to tell your story. Well, Mike, what's my story? I said, I don't know. Make one up. Make up whatever until you actually have a story. You need to be able to get in front of a person and explain to them that they have a problem. Now, it's real simple because every human being in the world has exactly the same problem. They're going to die. And to somebody, whether there's a emotional tie or not, somebody's got a financial loss or gain when someone dies. As a person in the insurance industry, since that is our industry, then we need to be able to tell the story enough times to enough people that we meet the people who will listen to our solution. So, what did E.N. Gray say? He said, a successful agent will do the things that a failure won't. Ladies and gentlemen, we are in an industry where less than 1% of the agents hired this year will be here 14 months from now. That's horrendous. And why is that? Well, because, and there's a whole long list of reasons, so you can fill in any reason you want. But if you decide that you're going to be successful and you do all the things that you're told to do and that you learn to do, that the agent who makes the excuse and then doesn't do it, you'll be successful, they won't be. Now, they may go somewhere else and be successful, but not in this industry.
So E.N. Gray basically gave a speech of the common denominator of success, and
Yeah.
there you have it.
And as I said, anybody that asks, send me an email. I will be glad to send you a copy of the address. It is certainly worth listening to. As a matter of fact, when I first became an agent in 1971, a gentleman by the name of Al Nolte was he called himself the Old Dutchman, was my original manager. He gave me a copy of this. And I actually, back in the days when we had cassette recorders in our cars, I would actually play it when I was out on the debit every single day. And I would take it apart, I would analyze it. But when it all came down, it was just a couple words. A successful agent will do what a failure won't.
Now that's just to get the agent out in the community. But you mentioned something that I think is worth revisiting. So everyone's heard there's two things that are for certain, taxes and death, right?
And not even taxes if you're real smart.
Yeah, for most people. But you mentioned that there was either financial gain or a demise upon the death of an individual, right?
Yeah.
So people are, here's the interesting thing. If Ian Gray mentioned that the successful agent will do what the failure won't, can you imagine showing up to the funeral home or to a hospital bed for someone who you didn't want to have that conversation with because you fear them laughing at you, discounting you, throwing you out the door for whatever, but imagine in the previous video you talked about you actually had 12 claims in 1 year. That's
Let me backtrack on what you were just asking me because it brought a story to mind.
yeah.
Al Nolte's boss was a guy by the name of Chuck Heasley. Chuck Heasley was a monument in the prudential industry, prudential company. He was one of the first, he was one in a 5-man unit in Shippingburg, Pennsylvania, which is just outside of Pittsburgh. They were the first $1 million unit in Prudential's history back in 1953 or 4. And what that meant is every man on that unit, all 5 men, did a minimum of $1 million in production. Now, later on, we started talking about millions in premium. But back then, $1 million in production, when the average policy was around 1,000 or 5,000 each, was a huge amount of sales. Chuck Heasley once told me a story how he got into the business. And how he got it, or when he first got into business, I should say, he went into a haberdashery. He himself was in the tailoring business before he went into insurance. He went into a haberdashery, as they were called back then, to cold call this manager or this owner, to sell insurance. He talked to this guy till he was blue in the face, left, came back 2 or 3 times, kept talking to this guy over and over and over and over again. Could not get him to budge. And finally, one day he said, look, what could I do that would interest you in purchasing insurance? The guy thought a second, turned to Chuck and said, if you could get rid of that SOB across the street, who's also selling clothing, I'll pay you any premium you want. You know what Chuck did? He went out and ended up selling a buy-sell between the 2 owners of the 2 stores and did exactly what his client told him. He found a way that he could make both owners buy out the other one.
Right.
True story.
Yeah.
So when we talk about, if he hadn't gone back to that haberdashery as many times as he did, and if he hadn't looked and listened to what the client was saying, which most agents don't, they have a canned speech. They go out and say whatever they say, and then they get excited when they make a sale. How about if you listen to every client? Because every client you talk to, if you talk to them enough, will tell you exactly what they need and exactly what they'll buy.
The reason they say no is the reason they'll use to buy.
Yep. Exactly correct.
Well, guys, this has been another segment of Advanced Insurance Services. Of course, I had the pleasure to walk alongside, Mike Domico, and with the stories, with the experience, with the knowledge, we're just, able to bring it to you. We don't, it's so important for us to educate you and have you exposed to the industry. Some of the things we talk about, we're not going to be the most popular people, but that's okay. I think Mike's pretty used to that, right? Yeah. So tune in until next time when we, continue to discuss, topics in the industry and insurance and financial services. The main concepts that Advanced Insurance Services talks about, which is, infinite banking, the OPM strategy, banking arbitrage. Then we talk about life settlements and the legacy planning. Until next time, guys, hope that you guys can take this information to heart. Now, we're not talking about any company in particular. We're not, signaling out any person. but we just want to talk about, you know, the industry and how you can have success in one of the most important industries there are that drive the economy. Thanks, Mike. We'll talk to you guys soon.
Thank you, Minor.